Good day, everyone. I hope you're having a great day so far. First, let us have a recap kasi nag-exam week, right? Para naman ma-refresh tayo sa kung ano na yung na-discuss natin sa subject na to. So, last meeting, we have talked about the elements and principles of art. And we have mentioned that artwork can be categorized into two major groups, which are auditory art and visual art. Auditory art consists of all kinds of artwork that can be heard by the human ear, and it includes art pieces such as songs, dramas, and other spoken literature that can be recited. On the other hand, we also discuss about visual art, and it consists of all artworks that can be seen by the human eye. Common examples of visual art includes paintings, artistic drawings, sculptures. Performance art also is an example not just for visual but also pwede din sa auditory art in some cases. It has a combination of both visual art and auditory art. Um, all of the above mentioned forms of art were different in early civilizations. And this is the reason why we are going to proceed on our next topic, which is the Western art history. So this unit is divided into three subtopics, namely art in early civilization, which is our focus in this video lecture. Second, na i-discuss natin next week, second topic is the art in the emerging Europe. And lastly, we have the modern and contemporary art. But as I have said, we will be focusing on the first topic under Western art history, art in early civilization. And here is our learning objective for this lesson. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to first discuss how art was used by prehistoric people to depict everyday life. Second, identify the central themes of prehistoric art, and third, differentiate the techniques used during the three kingdoms of early Egypt, and lastly, explain how art is linked with religion in early Egyptian civilization. So, art is very interesting subject that has evolved into many stages from early civilizations to the current generation. So, iikot ang ating discussion sa pinagmulan ng different kinds, different medium of artwork hanggang sa contemporary or modern art. In unearthing of archaeological artifacts and remains provides us, people of modern society, a glimpse of the beliefs, practices, and activities of early civilizations. However, the motives and reason behind the creation of ancient materials such as sculptures, painting, and architectural structures may not be clearly defined. Hindi natin mapo-point out exactly kung ano ba yung reason nila sa paggawa ng mga art na to before. Nevertheless, the early people produced such material that reflect their attitude and belief system on different aspects of life, such as spiritual, social, political, and economic matters. As the early humans started to transition from being nomads to permanent settlers, their everyday activities also had some changes, which is evident through the materials and even the works of art that they have created. Sabi nga niyan, the only constant thing in this world is change. So, syempre, nagbabago ang ating environment at kasabay ng pagbabago na yun, kailangan natin na mag-survive din or mag-adapt on the changes that is happening around us. And evidently, through the materials or artworks that we will be seeing in this lecture, somehow, makikita natin kung paano nag-adapt ang mga tao from early civilization. And despite changes as a result of adopting to their environment, there are central themes in their artworks. And most ancient artworks depicts religious symbols, a wide array of organisms from nature and activities of everyday life. So, let us start our discussion by talking about the Stone Age art. So, Stone Age art is the oldest form of art making so that we can find on Earth. when we say Stone Age, it is a it is a term, sorry. It is a term used to describe a period of history when stones were used to make tools for survival. Okay, so though prehistoric humans would not necessarily possess the complex of natural capabilities to tell their story through written records and accounts, some artifacts in the form of cave paintings and sculpture would serve as the storytellers. So, speaking of cave paintings and drawings, remember the cave drawings in Lascaux Cave that we have mentioned sa ating introductory lesson dito sa GE6 Art Appreciation. Cave paintings or drawings were made by ancient civilization. And these carvings, drawings, and paintings evoke naturalism, which is evidently seen through the contours of animals' body and their dark colors. So, most of us will think siguro na these people who created this artwork or paintings, to be specific, inside the cave are so primitive, right? Kasi wala pa silang formal training or education in making these crafts. Wala pang mga materials or advanced resources sa mga paggawa ng artwork na to. But, according sa ating mga historians and scholars, their art techniques were considered advanced for their time. In fact, some of the early humans already used their own version of spray painting techniques by using ground pigments blown through reeds or hollowed out bones, since these were readily available during their time. And aside from these spray painting techniques, bago pa ma-put into words or writings yung elements and principles of art that we have discussed last week, diba, bago mag-exam week, at bago pa siya maituro sa mga students natin ngayon, yung mga ancestors natin had worked already on the foreshortening and contrasting of lights and shadows to create the illusion of three-dimensional forms and seemingly real representation of animals. So, itong mga ancestor natin is very creative na and very resourceful na din during that time, kahit na wala pang advanced technology and wala pang mga proper tools in making those kind of artworks. Okay. So, and in order for us to talk about prehistoric art, there is a need to situate them within the context of the three periods of Stone Age culture, which are roughly span the 14,000 to 2000 BCE. We have three periods, as I have said, under periods of Stone Age culture. And first, we have Paleolithic age. This is the late years of Old Stone Age. Sunod dito is Mesolithic or the Middle Stone Age. And third, Neolithic or the New Stone Age. So the Stone Age has witnessed how humans were able to lead more stable lives and eventually come up with permanent shelters and tools for survival. To complement this stability and sense of permanence, early humans also turned to creation of paintings and sculptures that depict humans, animals, and their natural habitats. So, first, i-discuss natin, ano ba yung klase ng way of, or ano ba yung way of living nila during the Paleolithic age? Or ano ba yung mga kind of artworks na na-produce nila during that era? So, Paleolithic art is a product of climate change. So, as the climate got colder, part of the early humans' instinct is to look for shelters. Of course, in able for you to survive, you have to look for shelter or lugar kung saan hindi ganoon kalamig at makakasurvive ang iyong katawan. And that would provide them with warmth. And caves became protective havens for the early humans. And these caves paved the way for the birth of their first attempt to create art. Another cave painting was found in Lascaux, France. These paintings were accidentally found by two boys who chased after their dog into the hole where their ball got stuck in. So, aksidente lang ang hanap or pagkaka-discover dito sa artwork na to inside a cave dito din sa Lascaux, ano? And when they followed the dog, they were astonished to discover a cave with beautiful paintings. And the cave paintings would eventually called the Hall of Bulls. So as we have mentioned also in our previous discussion, it is said that art can be considered ornamental or parang aesthetic for aesthetic purposes or decorative purposes, but there is a little evidence to fully back up this notion that early humans created these cave paintings for that mere purpose. Some would say that this cave with painting all over the walls and ceiling serve as a kind of sanctuary for the early humans as a safe haven nga. And also, dito din ginaganap yung mga religious rituals. The religious rituals could have possibly transpired within the confines of the caves. And some also believe, and I think you would also agree, the class will also agree on this, that there is a linkage between what was drawn and what could happen in real life. Example nga nito ay yung mga cave paintings na kanina pa natin binabanggit. Hindi lang sila to serve a decoration sa cave na nagsilbing tirahan nila or shelter nila, but it also translate how they live and survive during that era. Okay? So next is the Mesolithic art. Now let us take a look on the next period during the Stone Age art. So the term Mesolithic art refers to all arts and crafts created between the end of Paleolithic Ice Age and the beginning of farming with its cultivation and animal husbandry. So to put the Mesolithic into context, the two defining periods of Stone Age were the Paleolithic nga, and yung last nating i-discuss na stage is the Neolithic era. Meaning Old Stone Age and New Stone Age to be respectively. But hunters gatherers don't transform themselves into settled farmers overnight, 'di ba? That would be impossible. So in between these two defining eras, we find an elastic second period which acts as a bridge between them. And the second period is called the Mesolithic period or the Middle Stone Age. And it begins at the end of the Ice Age, yung Paleolithic, roughly 10,000 BCE, and ends with the arrival of agriculture. So during the Mesolithic period, aside from cave paintings, humans developed engravings and ceramics to reflect their daily living or daily lives. They were nomadic and built temporary houses. Paleolithic was an age of purely hunting and gathering, but toward the Mesolithic period, the development of agriculture contributed to the rise of the permanent settlements. Some Mesolithic people continued with intensive hunting, while others practiced the initial stages of domestication. In addition, some of the artworks found reflected some of the early beliefs of humans, especially with life and fertility. And one of the artworks that reflected such beliefs would be a sculpture called the Venus of Willendorf. So the Venus of Willendorf, this figure is highly abstracted woman from highlighted body parts associated with fertility. So the representation may show the importance of taking care of these body parts for procreation and consequently the survival of the species. Okay, so last stage under the Stone Age art is the Neolithic art or Stonehenge in England. Okay, so the Neolithic era, also known as the New Stone Age, was a period of human development that started about 15,000 BC and ended when the crafting of metal tools became popular. Although the time frame of this era varies between different regions of the world, the Neolithic era was one of the last part of the Stone Age, and it was defined by humans settling and living a more sedentary life, which derived into the first forms of farming. So most of the art from Neolithic period was inspired by daily events, just like yung mga naunang era, and it used materials that were easily found in the surroundings. Therefore, we find that art during this period consisted mostly of functional objects or yung may functional meaning talaga, yung mga kinecreate nilang art sa era na to, which is the Neolithic period. The shift from nomadic lifestyle, when we say nomadic, meaning parang walang permanent, hindi sila permanent settlers, palipat-lipat sila ng lugar. So, the shift from a nomadic lifestyle to settled communities brought the opportunity for creating permanent shelter. Therefore, the earliest forms of architecture appeared, and with them, the first examples of exterior and interior decorations kasama na sa pagbuo ng mga architecture na yan. Okay? So, structures weren't built only for housing but also to protect food and to create places for performing rituals. And furthermore, constructions were also created to leave legacy. Items for decoration weren't mere aesthetic object at that time. Hindi lang siya pure for decorative purposes. Decorative items and art were believed to have supernatural powers. During that time, yun yung kanilang paniniwala. And for example, a warrior figurine for protection or a female figurine to increase fertility. So, ito yung paniniwala nila before when it comes to decorative items. Na yung art na yon, they believe that it contains supernatural powers, na pwedeng kung hindi sila nabibiyayaan ng anak, sa paglalagay ng mga figurines na to sa kanilang mga bahay or shelter, ay pwedeng makatulong para sila ay makapag-procreate. Okay. Now we move into what is probably one of the most fascinating aspects of Neolithic art, Neolithic megaliths. Okay, so these are found in numerous regions of the world, and many are famously known in the regions of Europe, like England and Ireland. Stonehenge is in England on Salisbury Plain, Wiltshire. It is one of the biggest prehistoric structures constructed, consisting of numerous large stones arranged in a circle. So there is an outer circle and inner circle. So the outer circle consists of the stones standing vertically, each with a horizontal lintel stone. So the stone is made of sarsen stone, which is prevalent sandstone in England. The stone stands around 13 feet tall. So, mataas talaga siya. Measure to around 7 feet in width and weigh over 20 tons each. Okay? So, imagine kung paano nila kinonstruct ito. Talagang marami-raming manpower ang kinakailangan para mabuo itong Stonehenge na to. So, as to the function of Stonehenge, it possibly serve religious and ceremonial purposes. So, siguro before, dito nagaganap yung kanilang mga rituals, mga seremonya, and its orientation is towards the sunrise on the summer solstice, and which gives a further indication for its purpose. Talagang parang ginamit nila itong Stonehenge na to noong for religious purposes or ceremonial purposes. It was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1986. So ito po ay UNESCO World Heritage Site. Okay, so let us sum up what we have discussed so far. Again, we have 3 periods under Stone age culture. First, sabi natin, meron tayong Paleolithic age. Next is Mesolithic. And lastly, we have Neolithic. The Paleolithic was an age of purely hunting and gathering. But toward the Mesolithic period, the development of agriculture contributed to the rise of permanent settlements. And then later, Neolithic period is distinguished by domestication and of plants and animals. When it comes to creating art, this periods varies depending on the environment, they were in. Makikita natin yung pagkakaiba-iba ng mga tools na ginamit sa kanilang craft sa each period na ating i-discuss. Paleolithic people made small carvings out of bone, horn, or stone that at the end of their era. They used flint tools. Sa Neolithic artists were different from the Paleolithic people because they developed skills in pottery. They learned to model and made baked clay statues. And yung if ko compare natin yung mga artworks during the Paleolithic era and sa Neolithic art, 'di ba? Makikita natin na nag-develop din talaga yung mga ginagawa nilang crafts kasi from just a mere painting or drawings, gumawa sila ng mga craft na mapapakinabangan nila, na makakatulong sa kanilang daily living. Okay. Now, let's proceed in discussing the prehistoric art and also, isum up din natin yung mga na-discuss pa din natin, in addition doon sa ating mga na-discuss. Okay, so, we have mentioned as well the transition of early civilization from the aforementioned periods of Stone Age culture. And, sabi natin, nomadic lifestyle of early human to permanent settlements. And also, Stone Age witnessed how humans were able to lead more stable lives and eventually come up with permanent shelters and tools for survival. And lastly, early humans also turned the creation of paintings and sculptures that depict human, animals, and their natural habitats. And sabi natin kanina, just to be clear, when we say nomadic, it means roaming about from place to place aimlessly, frequently, or without a fixed pattern of movement. So makikita natin yung evolution din ng mga early humans natin, from palipat-lipat sila ng lugar, yung mga shelters nila hindi ganun ka-stable kasi iiwan din naman nila yan sa pagdating ng oras, lipat din sila ng another environment or another place. And then, pagdating ng Neolithic, doon na nag-form yung permanent settlements. Mas naging stable na yung kanilang shelters at doon na sila nagsimula ng agriculture. Okay. Now, let us take a look at another culture that made a big impact and played an important role in the development of art history. Egyptian art. Okay. Art during Egyptian civilization is also an important topic to talk about. Art in ancient Egypt was used to pass messages concerning religion, dynasties, kingdom, and culture. Sculpture and painting were the two main forms of art that were used by artists during Egyptian civilization. In the early years, Egyptians had well-organized administrative structures which were used to unite the people of Egypt. So the Egyptian civilization can be divided into three periods. So again, Egyptian civilization can be divided into three periods. So, wag tayong malilito. Kanina yung Stone Age culture or Stone Age art, tatlo din, na-divide din siya into three eras. We have the Paleolithic, we have the Mesolithic, and lastly, we have Neolithic. Dito naman sa Egyptian art, sa Egyptian civilization, meron din tayong tatlong periods, which is the Old, Middle, and the New Kingdom. So, looking at the three periods, it can be noticed that for the Egyptians, art should be something religious and spiritual. So, mostly during this time, during their era, dito umikot yung kanilang, yung kultura ng kanilang art sa religious and spiritual. Ito yung purpose. There may have been differences in the techniques used and style emphasized, but there are common denominations among the artworks created during the respective time periods. Artwork in ancient Egypt were not just done by people who chose to do art because they were creative, but people who were well-trained were the ones who formed teams to do artworks. So the artisans during this time were paid to do the artworks, and therefore they were committed to their work because they did not want to lose their jobs. And this implied that poor workmanship was not tolerated, and therefore a team of artisans was led by a master craftsman who could work on every branch of art. So the word of master or the work of a master craftsman was to offer guidance to his assistants while working. So, dito sa Egyptian art, makikita na natin na yung mga tao before is may appreciation at may pagpapahalaga sa mga work ng ating mga artists and artisans. Kasi, hindi nila ito ginagawa for free. May bayad. It's somehow a profession doon sa mga tao before, mga artisans ng Egyptian civilization or Egyptian art. Okay? So, yung ating craftsman, yung parang manager or nagsisilbing supervisor sa mga artisans natin, he also assessed the work that other artisans did, but no individual was allowed to assess the contributions of a master craftsman. So, during Stone Age culture, wala pang formal education about creating an art, right? And they make art to communicate, but mostly for survival, sabi nga natin. On the other hand, artworks in ancient Egypt serve, again, two main purposes. So the first one, sabi natin, was to give glory or glorify and honor the gods and mga paroa na tinatawag nila, who was responsible for presiding over major religious ceremonies. The second major purpose was to preserve the values of life and also facilitate the transition of human beings from life to death. So, very religious ang foundation ng art ng ancient Egypt. And they believe that there was life after death. And it was evident from the kinds of artworks that were done on the tombs where the dead people were buried. So before I talk about artworks that were done on the tombs, and it is important also to talk about the paroas, because any literature about art concerning ancient Egypt cannot be complete without mentioning the symbolic pyramids and images of paroas, right? And the images of paroas were well decorated using different colors which had specific meanings. The pharaoh was considered to be a supreme leader who had divine powers, and therefore he was considered as important as the gods and goddesses. Egypt in life after death, and that royal kings continued to live a royal life even after death. The artworks during Egyptian civilization continue to influence the current world of art, because whenever the name Egypt is mentioned in any part of the world by many artists, the image of pharaoh or a pyramid is usually shown. In other words, the sculptures of pharaohs are currently associated with the powerful rulers of Egypt during Egyptian civilization. Now let us take a look on the different creation during the Egyptian civilization. So first on the list is the Narmer palette. So it was a palette that utilized and applied dark colors around King Narmer's eyes. And the palette was also a symbol that commemorates the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. So, sino ba si Narmer? Bakit siya ginawa ng ganitong artwork para i-commemorate ang kanyang alaala and also ang kanyang mga nagawa during his stay during being a king. Okay? So, si Narmer or King Narmer, or binabasa din ata siyang Mernar, I don't know. Basta, one thing is for sure, he was a king. He was a ruler of ancient Egypt, and at the end of the pre-dynastic period and the beginning of early dynastic period, he is often credited with uniting Egypt and becoming the first king of Upper and Lower Egypt. So the overall military symbolism on the palette is clear. Using different types of imagery, the king is shown again and again as a victorious over his enemies. So he is shown striking down a kneeling enemy, whilst stepping on the bodies of some other foes on the pallet's back, and on the front of the pallet, he is represented overlooking the decapitated corpses of his foes, or as a bull vigorously trampling an enemy and breaking down the walls of a city or a fortress. Okay, so makikita natin dito yung achievement ni King Narmer, napag-isa niya yung Upper and Lower Egypt, and he became the first king of these two places or kingdoms. Okay, so next is the Great Pyramid of Giza. So, during the Old Kingdom, one of the architectural wonders was also constructed. The pyramids in Giza serve as a tomb, since their main purpose was to provide a resting place for the pharaohs. So, yan. Okay, next artwork during this era is the Queen Nefertiti. So there is emphasis to lifelike features of the face, like an elongate jaw and thick lidded eyes. Most artists created artworks that are natural and seemingly real, highlighting the features of their subjects. Naturalism was not only used to depict the pharaoh, but also used for members of the royal family. So the bust of Queen Nefertiti has a long and sensuous neck, as you can see on the picture. Queen Nefertiti, whose name means a beautiful woman has come, was the queen of Egypt and wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten during the 14th century BC. She and her husband established the cult of Aten, the sun god, and promoted Egyptian artwork that was radically different from its predecessors. Okay, yan. Para mas makita nyo yung sculpture kay Queen Nefertiti. Okay, so very pretty siya, very na-emphasize ang kanyang mga features talaga, and very realistic din yung pagkakagawa sa sculpture na to. Okay. So, next is King Tutankhamen. So, he became king at a very young age and died at the age of 18. Howard Carter discovered his tomb in 1922. They were astonished to find gold artworks and that the coffin was made out of solid gold. The body of the young king was irregular in linen of gold mask covered his face. Kasi during their time, kahit napatay na itong mga king na to or itong mga royalties na to, yung mga taong kanyang nasasakupan ay tinatrato pa din sila na with all the royalty, na kailangan maayos yung kanilang tombs, na maayos yung kanilang pananamit. So that is why nung nahanap nga itong libingan ni King Tutankhamen, nakita na covered ng gold mask ang kanyang face. Okay? So, yan. Si King Tutankhamen. Ito yung kanyang sculpture na ginawa to commemorate his memories and achievements then as a king. Okay, so summary, during the prehistoric period, the early humans had transitioned from a nomadic lifestyle to that more of permanent one, which led to early civilization. So some of the artworks discovered from this period would give modern society, us people that is part of modern society, a glimpse of what was life like during that period. And one of the early civilizations where art flourished was the Egyptian civilization. Throughout the three kingdoms of all the way to the Amarna Revolution, art has been directly used, particularly in religious and spiritual activities. Through this unearthed and discovered artworks, the modern world could have a better understanding of the past and how it can affect the present. So that ends concludes our lesson about art in early civilization. I hope that this session gives you additional wisdom on the history of art. Thank you for listening and see you during our synchronous schedule. Have a nice day.